Hello, everyone. Frank Hartman here from Biblical Mastery Academy. There was a movie made in the 1980s when I was a much younger man called The Year of Living Dangerously. It didn't have anything to do with biblical languages. So why am I bringing it up? Well, the title itself has always kind of reminded me of the year of learning Hebrew or year of learning Greek. I had an individual year of both when I started seminary. That first year, it had the potential to be a dangerous year. And so I want to talk today about just how dangerous are we when we think we know our Hebrew and Greek, but in fact, we're kind of blinded by the fact that we don't know what we don't know. We'll assume that we know a lot more than we do, and we'll look at a study that psychologists have actually proven or demonstrated that this is a fact. So what can be dangerous about biblical languages and our knowledge of them? Well, if you don't know anything about the biblical languages, you don't know any Hebrew, you don't know any Greek, you'll probably be much more willing to just admit you don't know, and therefore you won't be making presumptions. And I speak of this as maybe from the point of view of a pastor or a teacher of Bible studies. If you don't know anything about the biblical languages, you'll readily admit, I know nothing, and I'm doing the best I can with what I have. But where the danger comes in is when you know a little. And today's computer Bible software is really helping a lot of us know a very little about the biblical languages. We can look up individual words, either Strong's definitions for Greek and Hebrew words. We might look them up in a lexicon, and just to see what the gloss is, just to see what they mean, and then proceed with our understanding from there, only knowing what the dictionary says, not anything about how the word is used or the context or anything else. So we have more tools today to enable us to know a very little about the biblical languages, which in turn bolsters our confidence that we know a lot more about the biblical languages and how we should interpret them and exegete them than we really ought to. So where do we move forward from then? From the point of just knowing a few words from our computer Bible study, from looking it up in a Strong's Concordance or a lexicon? Well, the logical progression would then be to actually take a course or self-study to learn the language itself. Now, when we first start learning that language, we're going to be presented with a lot of vocabulary. Well, that's where we're already at. We know some selected vocabulary, and now we're going to learn some more. So now we start to think, I know a lot of Greek, or I know a lot of Hebrew. Look at all these words I know. And I even know some systems, some of the morphology of this that I'm learning. And so it reinforces our misnomer that we know this language, when in fact, we're just adding data to our knowledge. The further we progress, however, into learning the languages, and this can take months, if not years, but the further we progress, the more we start to realize there's a lot to learn about this language that I did not realize when I first thought I knew a biblical language like Greek or Hebrew. And so this can actually have the negative effect of removing our motivation. We start to realize this hill is a steeper hill to climb than I thought it was. And many times we might be tempted to just give up on our journey, when in fact, the more we know, the better off we're going to be if we persevere and we stick through it. Because as we progress through learning the language, we will start to see it gel together. We'll start to see the connections being made, and we'll start to appreciate the way the language functions beyond just a set of vocabulary. If you enjoy the content that we provide here at Biblical Mastery Academy, I encourage you to click the like button below. And if you want to be notified as to when new videos come out, click the subscribe bell so that you'll know right away when we have more releases for you to watch. And eventually, with continued study, we'll actually gain proficiency, if not mastery. And so this is a very good way to learn how to avoid being dangerous in our biblical language knowledge. Now, this is not something I've come up with. This is a demonstrated psychological, what's known as a cognitive bias in psychology, that we think we know more than we do until we know more, and then we realize how much we don't know about a particular subject. And this is known as the Dunning-Krueger effect. And I'll share with you a graphic that kind of shows this progression from thinking we know more than we do to recognizing how much we don't know. On the positive side, as we go through that journey, we'll gain mastery of what we do know. Well, since a picture's worth 1,000 words, and you don't want to hear me go through 1,000 words, I'm just going to share this chart. There are a lot of charts about this effect that you can look up. I find this one particularly helpful because it kind of has the responses on it that I would have as I progress through this chart. So, as I said earlier, when we don't know anything about the topic, we're ready to admit that we don't know anything about that topic. So we have, what is that? I don't know anything about it. But when we first start to learn something and we gain progress in it, especially a language, when we're not necessarily formally taking a language course, but because of sermon preparation, Bible study, notes in our Bibles, we start to pick up some biblical language words, some vocabulary. Like if you've ever studied John 21, you know there's different uses of agape versus phileo by Jesus. If you study in the Old Testament, you'll know there are very common words like in Genesis 1, yom, right? The first day, second day, yom used a lot, and therefore being used as a basis of, well, yeah, they're all 24-hour days because that's what yom means. And when we pick up this language through our Bible study, many times we can get up to this point where we start to think, I know everything, or at least I know a lot. And I've had experience with listening to sermons where the pastor may just throw out a Greek word because they picked it up in their sermon preparation. They never professed to know Greek or Hebrew, but now they're expounding Greek and Hebrew in their sermon, and they might be at that position right here where I know everything, or I know what this Greek word or Hebrew word means. This can also, of course, happen when we start to actually formally study a biblical language. We might get to that point. Wow, I'm in a Greek class. I'm in a Hebrew class. I know these languages, and we may delude ourselves to thinking we know a lot more than we know. But then as we progress in the course, in the language, we start to come to this dot and say, there's more to this than I thought. There's more complexity in this language than I ever knew before. And the negative side of this is that eventually we're going to get down here to this slope and start being unmotivated. We'll start saying, I'm never going to understand this. I can't learn this language. This is where a lot of people give up. This is where a lot of people just throw in the towel and say, I can't do this. I'm just going to go with what I have. And there's a lot of seminary students, future pastors, who do exactly this, that just say, well, I took my 1 year of Hebrew or 1 year of Greek in seminary. I don't remember hardly any of it, but I know enough to be dangerous, right? That's what we're talking about. And they don't get to that point. Here's the sweet spot down here. You want to get to this point where it starts to gel. It starts to make sense. You're seeing the systems at work. you're reading, you're seeing these things come together in your mind and in your understanding. And of course, this is where the encouragement comes, because now we're on an upswing and we're getting to a point of proficiency, if not mastery, that we start to realize I know a lot, but I know a lot about what I don't know, and I'm willing to admit it. And so that's kind of where we're going here in our biblical language journey, learning the proficiency, but also learning how to recognize I don't know as much as the entire field contains. So if I can ask then, how dangerous are you? Have you just learned a little bit of biblical languages? Have you just learned some vocabulary and you think you know the biblical languages? To be honest, even after a full year, it can be dangerous. A second year or more further study is many times warranted to really get a better understanding of the biblical languages. So 1 year isn't the magic formula. It's continual study, small, consistent steps through the biblical languages learning process is what we like to say here at Biblical Mastery Academy. And if you're interested in learning those small, consistent steps because you don't want to be dangerous to those who you preach to, those who you teach, or even in your own personal spiritual development, you don't want to misunderstand the scripture. So if you really want to do your best to understand and learn the biblical languages as they ought to be learned, I encourage you to go to bma.to, where you can download a free starter pack and get your first introduction to either Greek or Hebrew and really get to start learning the biblical languages beyond just that level of being dangerous. Until we get to see each other again, I want to wish you all shalom.